Hello, this is David Smith with Illinois Family Action. Earlier this year, with the urging of Governor J.B. Pritzker, the supermajority of Democrats in the General Assembly passed legislation to pass 3 advisory questions on our ballots for the upcoming election. Every voter in the state of Illinois will have the option of voting either yes or no to these questions. These questions are non-binding, meaning they simply act as an official poll of voters to guide state lawmakers on public opinion regarding questions of policy, but do not directly change law. It is then left up to the Illinois General Assembly to act on the results. Here are the 3 questions as they will appear on your ballot. Number 1, should any candidate appearing on the Illinois ballot for federal, state, or local office be subject to civil penalties if the candidate interferes or attempts to interfere with an election worker's official duties? Question number 2, should the Illinois Constitution be amended to create an additional 3% tax on income greater than $1 million for the purpose of dedicating funds raised to property tax relief? Question number 3, should all medically appropriate assisted reproductive treatments, including but not limited to in vitro fertilization, be covered by any health insurance plan in Illinois that provides coverage for pregnancy benefits without limitations on the number of treatments? So, Illinois Family Institute and Illinois Family Action are urging voters to vote no to all 3 of these questions. For more information about these ballot questions, we have recorded 3 short interviews with local experts. Stay tuned for that. For even more information, you can visit illinoisfamily.org/3 ballot questions, and that's the number 3 ballot questions, to access a printable article you can read and share. Again, that's illinoisfamily.org/3 ballot questions. All right, so now we're going to turn to the first advisory question on our ballots this year. And for that, we've invited Carol Davis to join us to talk about it. She is the foremost expert on election integrity here in Illinois. She is the chairman and founder, if I'm right, of the Illinois Conservative Union, and the founder of the West Suburban Patriots. And she talks to a lot of people throughout the state of Illinois about what they can do to clean up the voter rolls in their communities, which is a vital thing. And I'll be asking you a question about that. But first, did I miss anything, Carol?
No, I think just part of our Illinois Conservative Union is our Illinois Election Integrity Program. And of course, that has been thriving and working hard for almost a decade now. And
you're leading a lawsuit to try to clean up Illinois voter rolls, and we've joined in with you. But you've been working with Judicial Watch on that.
Yes, yes.
So a very important thing. So let's get right to it. The question number 3 on the ballot this year is, should any candidate appearing on the Illinois ballot for federal, state, or local office be subject to civil penalties if the candidate interferes or attempts to interfere with an election worker's official duties? Carol, I want to know why this is on the ballot, but what is the answer that you would like people to check on their ballot?
A big old NO on this one, Dave. Because like so much of what the left orchestrates, this is a setup. It's a setup. So, of course, we know what has happened to have these 3 non-binding referendums pop up on the ballot. And that was specifically to shut down the effort of the, Parents Coalition.
For parental rights. Yep.
Right. So I'm sure you've covered that.
Yep.
But this is just a sneaky way for them to enforce or reinforce and build up a narrative that the left has been very strongly building since, the 2020 election, that anybody on the right who questions elections is a dangerous right-wing terrorist, and everyone's in imminent danger the minute that they. So
So
this.
is this in response to the 2020 election in Georgia, for example, where we have good people who have been indicted along with Donald Trump simply because they were trying to investigate what went on in the county in Fulton County?
Absolutely, Dave. This is, like I say, the younger folks may not remember this, but we remember Rahm Emanuel, a good friend of Barack Obama's, who said, "Never let a crisis go to waste."
That's right.
And so they have taken, the whole January 6th thing and the fact that people woke up after that election and realized, oh my goodness, we have rampant documented fraud in our elections. There's no question about that. It's proven. But of course, don't believe your lying eyes, folks, because the left says that you're nuts and our elections are the best they've ever been. And so but again, they keep repeating the lie over and over, and too many people believe it. And so this is part of that narrative. And this is dangerous because it's the first step to them passing legislation which would make it illegal for anyone to question any election results. And believe it or not, Dave, some states have actually passed that kind of legislation. Seriously, I believe Michigan just passed a law that prohibits anyone from doing any investigation of election fraud.
That's crazy. That can't stand. And this is maybe a non-binding question on our ballot, so it doesn't have any impact of law, but it may give our lawmakers incentive to follow and say, look, this is what the people want, so we're going to do what Michigan did here in Illinois.
You're absolutely right. It's all part of the step-by-step incremental effort to strip every freedom we have.
And what is this that they're pretending to really care about the election results, but yet they won't implement voter ID? They have 6 weeks of early voting. They have mail-in voting, mail-in ballots. What is all this? Provisional ballots, and they won't clean up the ballot. The rolls, the voter rolls. It's a head fake, isn't it, Carol?
Exactly. Well, as you know, the lawsuit that we have going on right now with Judicial Watch to force the state to clean the rolls, that you all, Illinois Family Action, is a partner with, with Breakthrough Ideas. You know who has joined it to intervene in that lawsuit? The AFL-CIO Illinois and the Illinois Federation of Teachers fighting against us, intervening with the state against us to prohibit the cleaning of the voter rolls.
Oh, isn't that telling? It's left-wing partisan politics versus good citizen initiatives like what you're trying to get done. I mean, really, what Democrat, other than an activist, would want dirty rolls or ineligible voters to be voting?
Well, Dave, they might as well be putting up billboards all across the nation saying, we love to cheat and we're going to do everything we can to keep it this way. And yes, they're so blatant about it now that they're making themselves look like fools, Dave.
Well, on that note, I have another question. How concerned are you about the illegal aliens who have been streaming across our border, being bused to different locations, flown into different locations? How concerned are you that they are going to be given ballots to vote this election cycle?
I am extremely concerned, Dave. And, there's a whole process. Well, we know the left has been at this incrementally for decades, subtly undermining every safeguard in our elections.
And it worked in California, didn't it? It worked in California. They left the borders open, and look what happened to poor California.
And they want that for the whole country. So what's happening is many of these illegals coming over, these NGOs, non-governmental organizations, the minute they can get a hold of these people, and sometimes it's right at the border, they are shoving forms in front of their face and, here, this will get you food assistance. Here, this will get you housing. Here, this will get you free health care. Oh, and by the way, sign this one too. and then they're on the voter rolls, and there's no proof of citizenship
Oh,
required in federal law to to verify citizenship. And of course, these people won't be showing up at your local polling place. Don't think that, folks. But they don't even realize they've been added to the rolls. Once they're on the rolls, it's very easy for these left-wing operatives to order vote by mail ballots in those names
sure.
and harvest them
Yep.
and vote them for those non-citizens.
And we've got cases across the country where they're taking these people off the voter rolls. Am I correct? Missouri was just one?
Absolutely. And now Alabama has tried to take off really hundreds of thousands. And guess who is suing them? The left is suing the Department of Justice. Our own federal government is suing them for trying to clean illegals off the rolls.
Biden Harris,
Yep.
we do not need 4 more years of that. All right, last question for you, Carol. So early voting is going on in the state of Illinois. How should Illinois conservatives approach early voting? How should they handle it?
Well, it's like we're on, we're in sports, Dave, and someone has set the rules, and boy, we don't like those rules.
No,
We're
we
really
don't.
crabby about those rules.
Yeah.
You know what? We don't come to this field and pout and cry and take our ball and go home and forfeit the game.
No.
We need to get on that field and play by those rules until we can win and make the rules. And
Yes.
that's what we're going to do. So everybody show up as early as you can, vote early in person so you can mark that ballot and feed it through the tabulator yourself. Yes. Early voting allows you to find out if any shenanigans have gone on with your name, maybe being claimed by someone else. It gives you days to find out, oh, hey, if you show up and they say, oh, I'm sorry, you've got a vote by mail ballot out in your name, and you can say, hey, I never ordered a vote by mail ballot. Then you have days to call your local attorney general and call your sheriff and report that and investigate and be able to have your vote count instead of someone who stole your name.
You
so
used
vote early, folks.
I think a couple of years ago, you used the slogan, claim your name, right? Claim your name and vote.
Secure your vote. Claim your name, secure your vote.
That's it. So I was blanking on that. Claim your name and secure your vote. So when you vote early, no one else can claim your name. You've already put your ballot in, right?
That's right. Exactly.
All right.
So that's the way to do it.
Any final thoughts?
No, and I appreciate this opportunity to get the word out. Vote no on that referendum, folks.
Yes. Well, we want everyone to vote no on all 3 of them. But for this one, we've got Carol Davis from Illinois Conservative Union working diligently to bring voter election integrity back to Illinois. Thank you, Carol, for all your work. You're amazing.
Thank you, Dave. Remember, work, pray, work, pray, work, pray.
That's right. Amen to that. All right, Carol, God bless you. So now we're going to turn to a good friend of ours, Ed Ronkowski, who now is a retired attorney. He served how many years in the state's attorney's office in Cook County?
Altogether, I was a prosecutor for 3 decades.
For over 30 years, and then he served as a Republican precinct committeeman, chairman, and then chairman of the county for a few years. And we're very grateful for his service. He's also helped with election law in Will County and Cook County probably for years. So we're very grateful for that. Now, as you know, Ed, on the Illinois ballot this year, we have 3 referendum questions. The Illinois Democrats decided to throw 3 questions on the ballot in the hopes that it will elicit a greater turnout for their side. I guess supermajorities in the Illinois House and in the Illinois Senate are not enough. But these are non-binding questions, thankfully. However, they could be used by state lawmakers to initiate new legislation and push it in the new General Assembly starting in 2025. So question 2 has to do with our Illinois Constitution. And who better to ask than a election attorney who knows his stuff about the Illinois Constitution? And question 2 simply asks, should the Illinois Constitution be amended to impose a 3% tax on income over $1 million for funding property reliefs? In other words, let's steal from Peter so we can give some relief to Paul. What's your thoughts?
Well, I have to point out that the reason there's 3 on the ballot is that's the maximum that you could have. And the Democrats do that in years when they don't want the Republicans to put true conservative things on the advisory ballot.
There you go.
So they're handcuffing us right from the get-go by using insider knowledge and getting 3 of their referendums on there as wedge issues.
Yep.
As to the actual issue, the fact of the matter is the top 10% of the revenue, the taxpayers that pay taxes to the U.S. government in income taxes is a larger share of the tax burden than their counterparts in other countries.
Right.
In 2018, they showed that 1% of the taxpayers paid a revenue of $616 billion in income taxes, which amounts to 40% of all the income tax raised.
Yep.
And they paid a larger share of their tax burden than was borne by the 40% of the taxpayer, 90% of the taxpayers in the lower brackets.
Wow.
Now, what's interesting is there's this economic principle, what's been called the Laffer curve, and I have to spell it so it's not laughter. It's Laffer.
And named after really Art Laffer.
Yeah, yep. And they call it the Laffer curve, and that's a economic principle that when you increase tax rates to the overall tax burden on the taxpayer beyond a certain percentage,
Threshold. Yep.
Yeah, threshold, then the actual revenue goes down. And if you remember John F. Kennedy, when he was first elected in his first year in office, he passed a really massive tax decrease, tax cut, and the revenue went up.
That's right.
You know? So one study showed by a professor who academically studied this that he estimates that the top of the Laffer curve should be somewhere between 33 and 35%. When I studied this about a decade ago, when I had more time to look at it, it actually looked like it should be somewhere in the upper 20s, is where the 28% or so, something like that on the Laffer curve. So they end up a lot sometimes getting less revenue on that. Now, Illinois doesn't have a millionaire's tax, but other states have tried it. Maryland was a classic example. When they passed the income tax there, they ended up, let's see, how was it?
Was that a gradual income tax there?
Well, it was a graduated income tax, and they had an income tax on millionaires, especially.
6.25%.
Maryland, 31,000 people moved out, and there was a net revenue over the next revenue drop from those millionaires that were paying taxes of $5.5 billion in less income to Maryland.
Wow.
New York had a income tax on millionaires.
Yep.
And 1,453 moved out in the first year. So that's what happens there. These people vote with their feet.
That's right. Well, it sounds like something that's happening in Illinois. We've got a lot of wealthy people leaving the state of Illinois, don't we?
I'm not a millionaire, but I'll tell you what, I moved out of the state on January 4th of this year to move up here, and I saved $13,000 in taxes by the
property
move.
Taxes, right?
Yes.
Property tax. Yeah. So
Yes.
now you're in Wisconsin, and you're going to help that state turn red, which is awesome. Unfortunately, the Democrats don't seem to realize that this is counterproductive. When Reagan decreased taxes, there was also a influx of revenue into the Treasury, wasn't there?
Yes.
So, Now, just remind me, a couple of years ago, was it 2 or 4 years ago that Illinois tried to pass a constitutional amendment for a graduated income tax, but it was rejected by the voters? Why are they trying to do this again?
They're just trying to create wedge issues. That's why it's an advisory referendum. And they want to try to peel off some of the Republican votes to get them to become more liberal by pushing this false issue.
Yeah. So the liberal line is, well, millionaires have got to pay their fair share. In my book, it's not fair to tax them at a greater rate than I'm taxed at. What do you think?
Well, it's we're already taxed. The richer people are already taxed more than their counterparts in other parts of the world. So, how much more money are you going to get out of them?
That's
and
right.
Then the millionaires, they could move. They could they could avoid the taxes by taking capital gains instead of revenue out of their businesses. They hired tax accountants that figure out ways to structure their 401s and their Roth accounts and their IRAs. They donate to charities.
Yes, they do.
And they use health savings account. They use all these sort of techniques to avoid the taxes.
That's right. So in the end, Ed, what is your recommendation to the voters of Illinois on this question number 2 on our ballots? Yay or nay?
Oh, that's got to be a definite no.
It's a big no. Illinois Family Action agrees with you. And Ed, we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. God bless you.
Thank you for having me.
Referendum question number 3 happens to do with so-called reproductive health and in vitro fertilization. And the question reads, should all medically appropriate assisted reproductive treatments, including but not limited to in vitro fertilization, be covered by any health insurance plan in Illinois that provides coverage for pregnancy benefits without limitation on the number of treatments? To answer this question today, I've asked Dr. Mark Zumhagen, a pediatrician and obstetrician for many, many years, who has delivered thousands of babies over his career, to give us his insight to this question. More about the morality of IVF, and of course, there's the morality of mandating health insurance plans cover this. But Mark, what's your thoughts on this question? How should voters look at this question on their ballot and then answer it?
Well, I would especially like to speak to this from the angle of being of a Christian voter.
That's right.
It is a confusing issue for Christians, because in a sense, in vitro seems like a very life-oriented process, right? We're allowing somebody that has not been able to have a pregnancy occur in the biological fashion, the way God designed us to. But here we are giving them an opportunity to have a life. And that seems like a very pro-life issue. But the problem is we have to look at what is the cost. And the cost is, I'm not talking about economics either. I'm talking about the nature of the technology. I'll just briefly go over it. So typically a woman is given extra hormones. Eggs are harvested, multiple eggs are harvested, and then later implanted after they've been fertilized. So, and it's all like up in the air, like whose eggs are we using? Whose sperm are we using? That's a very fluid issue. But let's just say in the best case scenario, it's a husband and wife who are infertile, and it's the wife's eggs and it's the husband's sperm. So we don't have to deal with any other ethical issues there. But even in that best case scenario, you're typically going to have multiple embryos, multiple human beings,
right.
Let's use the term. And then the question is, are you going to give birth to all those? Typically not. Currently, well, as of the statistics I came across in 2017, there are 1 million frozen embryos in the United States right now. And I can pretty much guarantee you those 1 million are not all going to be birthed. There's sort of different options if you have more embryos than you can need or work with, you can either donate them to science for experimentation. You can give permission for them to be destroyed, killed, basically. You can give permission them to be adopted. You can actually adopt your embryos to another person, but
those are called snowflake babies.
Yeah, it's not typically done. And even after the eggs have been implanted, this happened to a relative of mine. They ended up having 3 babies in the womb, triplets, and they were told, for the sake of of 2 of those babies, we should get rid of 1 because it will really improve their chances of survival.
Selective reduction.
Yes, that's the term. They don't call it abortion; they call it selective reduction. So it turns out, on the face of it, this turns out to be a very anti-life issue, which inevitably, I don't care how pro-life you are inevitably going to be and likely faced with the idea of terminating the life of one or multiple embryos, either before implantation or after implantation. And so this is not a pro-life measure. I grieve for people that are infertile, but this is a slippery slope that just has no end to it. We just, the one possible endpoint, if you've ever read the book Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, is that all the babies are bred in test tubes. And there are scientists that would be very much in favor of that and would continue to want to move this whole thing in that direction.
And then you have gene manipulation and all that other stuff.
I forgot to mention, that's true. Once the embryos are fertilized, they can spend a week determining what their genetics are like, and then you can determine if that embryo should be allowed to live. Well, so here's the test question I'm asking Christians to ask themselves. And I wrote it down because I knew I wouldn't say it as succinctly as I wanted to.
Sure.
2 test questions. Is it morally acceptable to end a human life when fill in the blank? Is it morally acceptable to end a human life when fill in the blank? And another follow-up question, because some people say, well, an embryo isn't really human yet. So let's ask this question. A human life begins to be or ceases to be made in the image of God when? So then we could say, well, okay, it's not made in the image of God when it's only 2 cells. Or, oh, maybe it's not made in the image of God when 90 years old and not really serving any useful function. As soon as you, again, open this door and begin to go down this path, there is no endpoint to it.
Well, let me add a third one there is when does a human embryo gain a soul?
Well, and that's
that answer?
I'm sort of asking it in that way as well. My idea is, when are you made in the image of God is sort of another way of saying, when does the child have a soul? And I think it's very well answered in Jeremiah. What is it, 1:5, where he says, before you were in the womb, I knew you. So God has his hand on our lives, crazily enough, even before conception, but certainly from conception on, we have that. The Bible would tell us that we have a soul. We are a human being. We are a very early human being, but we have all the attributes that God has for us to develop, and for us to start arbitrarily ending these souls. And like I said, there's 1 million frozen embryos as of 7 years ago. This is just not a pro-life issue. And
let me ask you one more question on that front. Just too, is what we didn't cover is, so what is the failure rate of these harvested implanted embryos? My mind, if I remember correctly, it's more than 50% end in a miscarriage. they
Well-
don't come to
Well,
fruition.
they said I came up with a couple of statistics there. One statistic is that 30% of people before 35, if they, the older you are, the less successful this is.
True.
But 37% succeed not in becoming fertilized, in having a live pregnancy. 37%. But another statistic I saw was that the pregnancy success rate is 2 to 12% per frozen egg. So you're right. It's a very low success rate.
So when you say count the costs, you're talking about all the embryos that have to be discarded or disposed of or miscarried in order for one live birth.
Right. How many lives are being sacrificed? And the cost is, I mean, obviously, if it was just one, that would be too much. But it's as you said, it's a low percentage of yield, if we want to look at it that way,
Sure.
and a high percentage of loss.
So in the end, Dr. Mark Zumhagen, what would you recommend voters, especially Christian conservative voters, how should they vote on that question?
Well, let me just add one other thing. I do have skin in the game, in the sense that I have several nieces and nephews that were conceived through in vitro. I love them to death. They're wonderful human beings. But again, if I was involved in the decision process with my family, I would have told them, don't do it. There's just, it's going to lead you down a road where life will be lost. So the answer from a Christian perspective is unquestionably no. It's a no vote, very strong no vote. We don't even have to think twice about it. All you have to realize is the amount of lives that are being sacrificed. And even if they are so-called embryos that are only, 50 cells or less, that is a human being.
Amen.
There's a slippery slope to allow a complete deviation from any semblance of Christianity. Any couple, any any arrangement.
And that's another point, Mark, is that this really in vitro is kind of a laboratory situation instead of the act of consummation, which is what the Lord wants us to do.
Right.
As married couples. Yes.
And once you step off that path, there is no end to where that path takes you. It does not take you towards a Christian worldview. It takes you directly away from it. More and more and more.
That's it. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Dr. Mark Zumhagen. Appreciate that. Our recommendation is to vote no on this advisory question. Thank you, Mark.
Clear cut. Okay. Thank you, Dave.